Hello and welcome to another episode of Rapidly Aging Technology. Today we're going to be talking about the Watermatic Filtermagic twins that I possess. These, as you can probably guess, are vacuum cleaners. And what's special about them? Well, there's a few special things about them. Well, one of the things is that these were sold exclusively door to door. You couldn't go into a shop, even a vacuum store, and just buy one of these, unless that vacuum store had gotten one and used and done a trade-in or something like that. These were sold exclusively door to door by originally the Watermatic company, as seen on the right. And then in about 2006, as far as I understand, a company called Superior Manufacturing Incorporated or Industries bought them out in about 2006. Now, the timeline isn't easy to decipher too much on these machines because SMI, the final company that owned it, ended up going out of business, leaving the business, etc. And there aren't a whole lot of records on these machines. They weren't very mainstream. They're always kind of a small niche product, which means that they didn't have necessarily the fanfare to deserve a book or articles or whatnot. I suspect that there are some books written on, say, Electrolux, now known as Eris, at least the company in the United States that we think of when we say Electrolux for vacuums. There's probably a good solid history and people can follow them. These not so much. The Watermatic V came out, I believe, in probably the late 90s, probably ran up into somewhere in the early 2000s. I believe, but can't confirm, that there was another model. I can confirm it existed. Can't confirm when exactly it came out. It was called the Stealth. So instead of saying Watermatic 5 up at the top, as you can see over there, it would say Stealth, and then it's with Filtermagic down below in the same pattern. See the kind of the rainbow stripe pattern. And that, I suspect, was the last model, either the last model made by the Watermatic company or the first model made by SMI when they took over but didn't change branding. And I'll explain why I think that. The key is the patterning of the decals that I've seen, and that it was called Stealth. Stealth implies it was quieter. And if it was quieter, it did something different with the motor, which the 2008 edition has done. But let's look at these machines, talk about some variants you might see of them, their features, and what makes them tick. So let's start with the Watermatic 5 here. And up at the top, it says the Clean Home System. Usually high-end vacuums, particularly door-to-door, are sold as a cleaning system because they do more than just vacuuming your floor. And with the logo, you can see Watermatic 5, and notice that there's a seahorse in between the water and Matic. That's because, they're emphasizing the water aspect. These vacuums, when set up properly, can take up water. They can be used to shampoo your carpets and your upholstery. Why would it be safe to do that? Well, for one, as you can see, since there's vents here, it uses what's called a bypass motor. That means that the fan that pulls the air through the filters and everything is separate from the cooling fan. That also means that the bits the electro bits that need to be cooled, like the copper coils and all the sensitive parts, are kept separate from the fan that's handling the dirt. And in the case of water pickup, the fan that could get wet. So it's the inside of this upper body is separated into two sections. Cooling and cleaning. That's important. Also, the cord is a thick, grounded cord. For my international viewers, in the United States, some cables only have the 2 pins and aren't grounded, and the ones that have the 3rd pin are grounded. And so it's a very thick cable, so safety has been built in. On the side, you can see it's held down by a simple clamp. Pops down. There's one on the other side, of course. We have a plug for the pigtail on the electric hose, because it does run an electric power head. And you have a big paddle that has just a nice traditional metal button underneath. This can be used by your foot or your hand. I tend to always use my hand rather than my foot. It's just how I do things. Now, important to note, this is metal, bucket is metal. The dolly that has all the casters, also metal. This thing has a lot of metal in it. And it's not really all that heavy, I'd say. I mean, it's about as heavy as you'd expect. Rubber bumper here. This top part here and handle, this is plastic. Now here is a Watermatic 3 manual, which actually came with my Watermatic 5. As you can see, the Watermatic 3 did not have the plastic cover over its cooling fan. That's all this is doing, is protecting the cooling fan from, I don't know, kids throwing dirt straight into it. And then it had a little metal handle on top. Overall, the design seems very similar. And I can't tell what type of casters it's using. It looks like double wheel plastic casters, which this uses. The reason I bring that up is because I've seen Watermatic 5s that have a dolly that uses ball casters. You know, casters when it's just one ball that rotates down below. I've also seen them with these being silver, and I've also seen ones, this one has gold covers on the casters. I've seen them where it's just plastic. I've also seen the ones that had ball casters, I've also seen with the gold. So there's some variance. I don't know if there's any rhyme or reason. On the back we have the Filterizer, which just plugs in. The design is weak in that it doesn't form a perfect seal, so some air blows around. Inside here, I won't crack it open, is just a kind of a basic sponge filter and a chunk of activated carbon, a charcoal filter for odor. In the very end, there's a sponge, which you can put scents to fragrance the air. That sponge, the way it's put in, it's kind of a bugger to try to get out, because there's a plastic cage that snaps in, that holds it in place inside. And that the design of the clip seems to be of such that they didn't really intend you to take it back out. So you end up really mangling that clip to finally do it. So if you want to put scents, I'd put them directly like on a rag or a little cotton ball. You can put them here and just let it blow through, or you could just suck it into the main canister. I forgot to clip my fingernails for filming again. But yeah, Filterizer gives it one final little layer of filtration, mainly for odor. Oh, and this is also threaded so that you can put the hose in to blow. So that's that. So let's talk about the SMI 2008 edition. So what's changed? Well, the finish is more of a matte color. And of course the logos have changed, and they're a kind of a pop-out sticker. So they're not just flat, they kind of stick out a little bit. So visually not much. The casters no longer have the gold covers. It has a high and low switch. Now the low is not super low, so if you're thinking you could use this as an air filter in your home, theoretically it could, but it's not going to be like nice and quiet. So it's basically clean or clean not as well. And I'm not really sure what the point of that is, unless you want it just a little bit quieter, which it is. The plug for the pigtail has been changed. This is now a standard plug. Most pigtails have this, I'm going to call it like a house shape. One side's just big and flat, and then it goes down, kind of makes it look like a little roof. That house shape is more standardized than the old one, which is a small rectangle. Fun fact, if you have an old one that uses the old square plug, and let's say you had to use a later hose that used this plug, get a Filter Queen cable adapter. The small rectangular Filter Queen plug matches the old plug just fine. So that's something you have. Now what's more significant about this model is, look here. What's missing? Well, we just talked about the other one having a bypass motor. This one doesn't. It uses what's called a flow-through motor, which means that the air that's been pulled through the dirt and through the filters to the bag or whatever you got is the same air that cools all the electrical components, which kind of explains why they moved away from the name Watermatic. And if you look at the cable, it's only a 2-prong. So here's my theory. The company that bought the Watermatic company, bought out the rights to the vacuum or whatever, however they did it, decided to cheapen the design. Why do I say cheapen? Well, there's one less step. You don't have to machine the vents here. There's also internally, you don't have to worry about separating the cleaning portion from the electrical portion. It's probably less complex inside. So it was a cheaper design. What do you lose? The ability to pick up water. Was it a feature people really used all that much? Now, for your average consumer, taking one of these, taking it apart, putting the ball valve in, putting it back together, shampooing, cleaning it out, drying it out, might have been not something they really wanted to use. So losing that water pickup ability may not have been a problem. So it's probably cheapened it, but it probably didn't really affect most of the customer base. Now I, with my Fairfax, which uses a very similar shampoo system as this, in fact, according to the Fairfax owner now, Fairfax used to be owned by the Watermatic company at one point, so there's some similarities. I'm fine with it. If you're doing a full shampoo job, you're doing a lot of upholstery, you're doing a lot of carpet, it's fine, right? There's some setup and takedown that takes some time, but overall, fine. If you want to do a quick spot cleaning though, might not be worth it. The design is cheaper, but not really in a way that might affect the consumer too badly. I mean, they did add some complexity with an extra switch, but the quality, it's cheaper, but with the same quality. Because this is all nice metal. The finish seems a little more modern than the shinier black finish. I can't really complain. And here's the kicker. The motor in this has greater performance than the motor in the old one. So in overall, it was an improvement. So now we've seen that. Oh, backtrack. Remember when I mentioned that I suspected that the stealth unit was related to the transition period to this type of model? This is quieter. Why is it quieter? Well, all the air and all the noise has to basically flow out the back through what's effectively a muffler. So it is a quieter running unit by a pretty noticeable portion. There are some air leaks though. It's not a sealed system. Around anything popping out the top, like this the cords section, this connector, the button underneath the paddle, the switch here, there is some air that escapes. It doesn't have to go through the filterizer back, but that's fine. Well, yeah, because the filterizer really isn't doing much as far as filtration, just odor, so not really much of a problem. Now let's crack these open and look at some other minor differences. Okay, starting with the 2008 edition, we'll pop it off. And first thing we have here is a cellulose disc filter. This in the manual is an option for extra filtration to put between the filters. But since this machine, oh, by the way, the company went out of business in 2014. Since you can't get the primary filter, I've done a little something extra. So on the 2008 edition, we have a filter disc with a rubber outside, which normally would be hitting the dirt directly. Normally you wouldn't have a filter underneath it. This reminds me a lot of the allergen filter bag cloth used on like a TriStar and some other vacuums. So it seems that they have picked a material which is readily available, probably mass produced somewhere. Now I think I've used this a little bit for some light dusting. Yep, you can see it has even used just a tiny bit. It shouldn't affect any score results. And that is the bottom side. It's just kind of a lighter, probably dingier color from being used. This filter here, this white portion which I've added, This is a filter designed for a competitor product known as the Silver King. Now, Silver King is also out of business. They went out of business, let's say right around the same time. That's kind of a shame, but here's the thing. These are HEPA rated. This particular white paper disc, this particular white polypropylene filter cloth is made by Glenn's Vac Filters, and they're really not all that expensive, and you can use them for multiple cleanings. They keep their airflow pretty good, and they filter a bit. So I switched to using that so that I can keep the main filters clean, because they used to be, you use them and then you kind of shake them off or vacuum them off using that cellulose filter in place by itself to just take all the dirt. On the bottom, we have a kind of like an electrostatic pre-motor filter, which is held together by a metal ring and then pushed up and underneath the rubber gasket. And I took that off just for you, even though it's a bugger to put in. See, not much to it. Fairly simple, and I'm going to say comparatively cheap compared to what it used to be. But it could do a very good job, I'm not sure. Now, this part is basically unchanged between the two models. This is the diffuser plate. With all its ridges and holes, it's designed to try to make the suction spread out over a greater surface area, so not all the dirt and dust tries to suck towards a small portion in the center and clog quickly. It does a decent job. You have Superior Manufacturing Incorporated. These were built in Virginia. And a Watermatic, I think, was also in Virginia too. So I'm going to put that guy back together, and then we're going to take a look at the filtration system of the Watermatic V. Right now we have the Watermatic V opened up, and you'll see as the bottom filter is a much different material. You'll notice it has a bit of a texture to it. Now, this is an old unit, so it's a bit stained up. It has been vacuumed thoroughly to try to clean it off. It has a rubber gasket, just like the other one. It's much more taut. You might notice the other one was a bit loose and floppy. This is held tight. And the other side looks more or less the same there. For the motor pre-filter, you have a slightly rougher material, but it's held much tighter than the other stuff, which does a better job filtering. I'm not sure. And we're going to do a little bit of a particle count, but we're going to use it with how I use it, which is with this filter in place. So we may or may not see the results coming through properly. But I kind of have a feeling that this stuff might, because this seems like it was really intentionally done, right? They made it this way for a very specific purpose. And the other one seems like it was just a switch to something more convenient. That red filter bag material is readily available. While this is the only vacuum I've seen with this kind of filter. Of course, you know, there are many vacuums out there. I might have missed it. So, yeah. Some differences were made into the filtration basic design. Now, these both, the data plate's on the other side, but the internal motors are both 7 amp, and the machine allots up to 2 amps for the power nozzle, which means this is up to a 9 amp machine. But the power nozzles, I think, are usually what? 1 amp? Maybe half an amp to 1 amp. So I don't think they're usually running at 9 amps, which means they're relatively energy efficient as far as a vacuum using power. Remember, 12 amps doesn't necessarily mean that it cleans all that well. It's like measuring a car by how much gas it uses. Hey, this car gets 10 miles to the gallon. Oh, well, that must be a very fast, powerful car. Well, maybe, but it could also just be inefficient. So when you're getting vacuums, pay attention. Now, they can make some fabulous 12 amp motors. Don't get me wrong. If you have a V12 motor in a car that's guzzling, only gets 10 miles to the gallon, it probably has some oomph to it. but there's also some trash cars that wouldn't. So when you see that a vacuum is being advertised as, oh look, it has 12 amps of power, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be all that great. You don't know. That's why you want to look into cubic feet per minute of airflow and inches of water lift, also known as suction. Now, between those two, you should have a good idea of how well a vacuum will do. There's other things like the power nozzle and whatnot, but using those numbers together, you should be able to make a reasonable decision. And those aren't usually on the box, so you have to do your research and see if someone did tests. There's a measurement called air watts, which I don't put much stock in, because air watts is a formula where you multiply the cubic feet per minute by the suction in reference to power usage, and it creates a curve. There's a channel called VacLab, which did a good example of this, that basically that formula can create a curve where you can either have a machine with a lot of airflow and not a whole lot of suction, or a lot of suction, not a lot of airflow, that will have the same air watts. Well, one of them is probably going to clean better than the other. Generally, I'm in the camp that says that airflow is more important than inches of water lift. Okay, well, whichever side of the fence you are on that argument, you don't know what machine you're getting if you just have air watts. So it's one of those marketing things that I wouldn't put a whole lot of stock in unless you have all the numbers on how it was made. So let's put this back together, and let's, with all the filters in place and not doing goofy like switching filters back and forth, let's just take some simple measurements of how these perform at the canister. All right, so this is, when I give you the cubic feet per minute, this is what I'm using to calculate that, which is I approximated the area of the gauge I'm using to create the area in cubic feet, and then my tool measures in feet per minute. Now this number is a bit different from VacLab's. I probably should use his number because I'm sure it's a little more accurate, but let's put it this way. If all my numbers are using this constant, they'll be relative to each other accurate. But I'm going to give you the raw numbers, so if you want to recompile them using VacLab's number, then you can do that. So that's great. So we're going to do basically gather CFM, inches of water lift, and we'll also do a particle count to see how well these things are filtering. On the flow-through motor on the 2008 edition, there will be some carbon dust coming from the brushes, which means that in theory, if both vacuums are filtering equally well, its number should be higher. I'm also going to measure them without the filterizer, because the filterizer has activated charcoal filters, which should be, releasing fragments of carbon, which will come up on the meter. So there we go. That's how we're going to be doing it. All right, the head-to-head. So first, let's do just a quick sound test. So I'm going to start with the Watermatic V. Now a lot of that noise is, of course, the air rushing into it, but let's see what the other one sounds like. That was on high. And low. Now, I don't know how well you can notice that, but in practice, especially when they have the hose attached, this one is a quieter unit. I don't have anything to measure its decibels or anything, but there we go. So first test will be water lift. So water lift is particularly useful for lifting water, so for like shampooing purposes. It's also important for maintaining airflow through resistance and over distances of hoses. So more water lift is generally better. I think it just is better. More is better. So we're going to start on high. So that is right about 90. Now we're looking at low. At low. Low, it's a tad over 60, maybe 61, 62. Now, especially for a flow-through motor, you don't want to keep it clogged for very long because otherwise it's not able to cool itself. So this one, the Watermatic V, has no high or low. I'll stick the gauge in, and it seals pretty well. That was maybe 80, 81, 82. So the new model has more water lift by, you could say up to 10 inches of water lift. Well, that's an improvement. If you pay attention to this meter down here, we're going to be measuring the maximum airflow in feet per minute that this gathers. As you can see, it's just a little anemometer. I'm probably saying that wrong. Basically, it's an airflow meter. So we'll just move it around a little bit because it doesn't match up perfectly to see what the maximum number we get, and then we'll calculate that. All right, 3248, 3,248 feet per minute. Let's calculate that out real quick. So that got us 89.64, which roughly rounds up to 90 cubic feet per minute. Well, that's pretty good, and that's actually the best measurement I've ever gotten on this guy. So now we'll see what the Filtermagic does. And we'll do it on high first. Let's, there we go. And we'll reset that back down up to the maximum number. And here we go. Well, look at that. And I did reset it. It also got 3248, which is the same measurement. And I measured the same way, trying to go around to find wherever the best, orientation would be to capture air. So, okay, so we've gained water lift, and we've certainly not lost any cubic feet per minute. In my past measurements, I found that this one seemed to more consistently get up here, and the other one seemed to need more fiddling to get up this close. But okay, so they're approximately the same as far as cubic feet per minute. That's great. Let's just try it on low, just for the sake of it. Let's clear that out. $2,697. Let's see what that is. All right. That one, 2,697 feet per minute, calculates out to about 74 cubic feet per minute. 74.43 and change. Okay. Well, I'm pretty sure there have been some vacuums on the market that have had that level product canister, It might be useful if you're doing some light dusting, but you definitely want it on high if you're doing the floor or anything where the suction relief valve can do it for you. Okay, so far, they're pretty close machines. Let's see what the filtration looks like on them. And keep in mind, this is a newer machine. They also had different levels of usage before I got them, so their filters one might be more shot than the other. This is kind of just for academic purposes, nothing super groundbreaking. So let's do that. So here we have our particle meter. Let's just do a baseline to see what it looks like in here. What this little guy will be doing, as you can see, sample time, this little fan will kick on. Using a laser, it's going to calculate what particles are in the air. Now, of course, this is made in the very high quality land known as China, so I don't know what its margin of error is going to be in practice. Now, as we can see, probably because we've been kicking up dust by running these vacuums and whatnot, there is some stuff in the air. It's going to finish its sample time. Once it's done, we're going to, so overall fairly clean air. I do have an air filter running. Once it's finished, we'll do that and compare it to the exhaust of these vacuums, because the numbers shouldn't be higher unless it's kind of just forcing extra dust into the air. And our final number, it's not too bad, it's still in the green. I've gotten it lower down to the 3000s in here, and then the 2.5 micron level I think I've gotten down to like 20s. Anywho, let's start our measurements. Oh no. Well, that's not very good. It had plenty of time to improve its results in case dust had entered into the system. So we can fairly say that that one is not filtering the best. And that's even when it's using an additional HEPA filter and a cellulose disc filter. So my guess is that the old filters are still pretty dingy and probably need a solid washing. Well, let's see what the other machine does. And then whichever one is best, we'll do a sample with the Filterizer on to see if it's catching anything extra. I don't expect it will. And then keep in mind that it doesn't catch all the air anyway, so some of the air would be at this level. All right, here we go on the Filtermagic 2008 edition. All right. Well, it looks like, if I remember right, because I already forgot the numbers, I think the old Watermatic V is doing slightly better here. Which, another factor, which should be in the favor of the 2008 edition, is that it was recently serviced at a vacuum store where they cleaned it all out. So the motor sounds a lot better now. Had kind of a squeak once it wound down. So it should be very nice and clean. But it's still putting out. Oh, well, don't forget, some of that's also going to be the carbon from the motor. So it's probably doing about the same. So we'll do a test now on the Watermatic V through its Filterizer to see if we get much of a difference. All right, here we go. Well, butter my buns and call me a sodomite. Look at that. It's that little sponge filter, that's the sponge filter and the chunk of activated charcoal and a little bit of the sponge at the end, which is just for fragrances. That is a much lower number. Now, for those of you who have experience with these, feel free to tell me if I was placing this in a way that would make the results less accurate, because that is a significant drop with a simple sponge filter. To the point where I'm a little skeptical. So I'm going to put this out there for especially VAC Lab to analyze the numbers I've gotten. But hey, any of you take a look. So the moral of the story, at least here for now, is use the Filterizer. Put that thing on there, because it's doing something. Also helps with odor. Whew. All right, testing complete. So let's just look at like what kind of accessories these generally use. All right, so Now remember when I was talking about the shampooing system? In order to pick up water, you set this inside the bucket. The idea is that when the water level gets too high, it will push this ball up, and then the suction will pull it up and seal it, cutting off all airflow and water flow. The machine's pitch will go up because it's clogged now, and you'll turn it off and dump it. So this is actually very similar, if not identical, to the one used by the Fairfax. The shampoo system, which I won't show you because, hey, if I'm not going to use it, I'll show. If I decide to shampoo with it, I'll show you. Basically, you hook it up to your faucet, and that's your water supply. So there's a big long hose from your faucet going in addition to a water pickup hose on this guy. So anyway, so clunky. So probably why they discontinued it. People might not have used it. Also, if I didn't mention, did you notice how these don't have any bags in them? That's how they work. They don't use bags, they just use filters. So they're just an empty bucket with a spout that points down and just blows dirt in. Which also means that their disc filter, which doesn't have a whole lot of surface area, theoretically could clog pretty quickly depending on the type of dust you're using. That's one weakness of them. But we'll talk about that in a second. So here is the type of power nozzle used on both of them. Because when I got these, this has later been upgraded. And if you notice on the picture from the Watermatic 3 manual, the power nozzle is basically identical to that version. The Watermatic 5, however, came with a different nozzle, which was a departure from this design. It was mechanically the same inside, except for it had a section for a light on it. And I'll show a picture if I can find one. It has manual height adjustment, which you rotate here to show the height, and what that does is raise and lower these feet, these little wheels down. I don't know how well you can see that. Soft brush roll, metal base plate, fairly small area for the air, which means it's cubic feet per minute. Its airflow is fairly concentrated, which is good. Comes with your basic tools. That dusting brush is actually from a Rainbow because it was missing one, and I like the Rainbow dusting brush. It's very plush and nice. The hose is kind of your traditional vinyl wire reinforced hose, which I prefer over Plastiflex. Plastiflex, in my experience, it seems to like to hold its shape a bit more, which means it seems a little stiffer, while especially a worn-in vinyl wrapped hose seems to be more compliant. The attachment, the way this attaches to the machine is, I think, intelligent, and I'm surprised it's not used more. It just screws in. If you screw it in all the way, it can't rotate. If you screw it in just slightly under, this can rotate the machine. And then here is the plug on the 2008 edition, which is a standard plug. The head, or the handle, is a gas pump style. Both of these use the same hose, except for the Watermatic 5 has a different plug on the end, the more rectangular one. Originally, the Watermatic 5 had a pistol grip when it was released, and a shorter hose. The hose is actually short enough that it seemed a little bit of a kind of a burden. This one is actually longer. So I think this is, I'm glad that I actually have this hose for both of them. So the gas pump, you can hold it here, you can hold it here. I guess you could hold it down here if you wanted. It has an on-off switch. The power nozzle, which the original Watermatic 5 one did not. And it has a suction relief, and that's where the power cord goes. The wand is extendable. So you press the button, and you can make it longer. And it has a holder for the cable and a cable that can stretch to go along with the height. So fairly good. I mean, the quality of this, the accessories feel good, except for the handle on that feels a little hollow. So for such a nice machine that was probably very expensive, I would expect a little better, but the hose itself feels nice. Everything else feels pretty good about it. I would like a more aggressive brush roll, something with firmer bristles that vibrates the carpet more. That helps with getting that sand and stuff out of the carpet a lot better. All right, before I leave you folks, one final note is if you run across one of these used, which is the only way you're going to find them now, or maybe new in box, because the company has been out of business since maybe 2014, should you get it? I'd say yes. I think that they're neat. I like this R2D2 style motor over dirt type of canister vacuum, which is the same style. These are related in a way to Fairfax. In fact, this is closer to the, let's back up. The McAllister bagless is kind of the foundation from which the Fairfax came. This is closer to the McAllister bagless in that it is still a bagless system. Inside it's just an empty bucket. And then you have filters sitting on top. The Fairfax ended up getting a bag later on. But they're both related, and I like this style of machine. The Silver King, I think, came from probably a different lineage, but is very similar in principle. I like that style of machine. So if you find one of these used, should you get it? Yes. I think they're very usable. They glide around easily on their casters. They have decent performance and power. Now there's more powerful machines, yes, certainly on the market. But if you go one of these cheap, why not? Filtration, still up in the air. Definitely could be better. But let's say you find one and you get it. All right, because these are great machines and because they're fun to use as far as, vacuuming can be fun. Well, what should you do as far as should you get extra filters for them, or should you just use the built-in, which is how they were designed to be used? I would say definitely get the HEPA style polypropylene fabric Glenn's vac filters, and you got two ways to use them. You could mount them the way I have the cellulose filters, which is over the main filter. I think these machines look great when they have basically the little white skirt poking out around the edges. I think that visually looks nice. But I would suggest using them the way I do under the main filter to make it so you don't have to clean the filters as often. Should you get the cellulose disc filters, which are still used primarily on the Fairfax? You know what? Kind of depends. On mine, I'm using both. And if you want to use both but in a cheaper way, getting this as the one to make the skirt with just a little extra layer filtration would be a good way to do that. You could just use two of these. It all depends on what you want to do. So I would recommend getting these and adding extra filtration, keeping those original filters clean, or as clean as possible. And then you should probably wash them, not just vacuum them out like I did, which would probably improve your filtration results. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions on these types of machines, no guarantees that I have the answer, but feel free to ask. And feel free to ask me about vacuums, because it's something that I collect, along with the computers and other old equipment that I tend to use. I mean, right out of frame, you probably notice that there's a machine there. That's a Thermax. It's a water vacuum like a Rainbow, but different, very different actually. Anyway, feel free to like and subscribe. Hit that bell icon, because you know that I don't usually upload very often, so I shouldn't be flooding your inbox. Have a great day. Subscribe to Retro Machines for computery stuff on Facebook, or join the Vacuum Land forums if you are kind of a vacuumy person. There's a lot of great folks on there, a lot of discussion, a lot of debate too, based upon what matters more as far as the vacuum goes. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed this. There are more vacuum videos to come, so get used to it, but there's also more computer videos to come. Remember, on my quad-core Pentium 4 series, the front panel connector is goofy on the Italian Tempest i5000 XL. So if you have any advice on how that fits, what pins are what, feel free to chime in. But remember, they have been moved. If you just look up the manual online, the manual is going to tell you something wrong, potentially. So there you go. You have a great day. And remember, Dysons are not the end all and be all of vacuums. They're very much not. Talk to you later. Bye.
Commence operation Vacuum Suck.